Were you ever a fan of detective shows? I mean, they could have been like old school ones like Rockford Files or even Murder She Wrote, or then maybe newer presentations like True Detective or even Sherlock. Well, Netflix is bringing a new detective series from Mexico called Belascoarán. It's out now, but is it worth examining? A city like Mexico City needs its own detective. Soon, Héctor Belascoarán will leave his corporate job and dull marriage to become an independent detective and tackle shocking criminal cases in 1970s Mexico City. This has a neo-noir feel to it as we follow Belascoarán in his investigations. Now, he narrates his inner thoughts, keeping us up to date on his progresses, but also letting us in on his suspicions, fears, even his snarky remarks. There are femme fatales and dubious villains, but what really makes this a little different is instead of our protagonist being all jaded and having this nihilistic outlook on society, he believes things can be better. He wants more for his city and he's out to make a positive change. It's a good twist to have a character so optimistic. I mean, he might be naive, but his hopefulness is great to watch. The aesthetics of the show are awesome. I mean, the production builds out the world of the late 70s with these orangish brown leather jackets, wide collars, and then a heavy reliance on the newspaper to deliver information. And the show jumps right into the mystery and then takes a quick moment to show us how Belascoarán gets into private detecting. Now, this isn't lingered on, but it provides enough background to make it feel complete, especially as we get to watch him just fumble his way through things at the start. He's then slowly honing his skills. The mysteries are engaging and dark, but they're never so gritty that the show takes on a feeling of watching something like Seven. Murder, kidnapping, corruption, and blackmail, they all get featured, which are built out enough to be intriguing in their mystery. And I like that the outcomes aren't telegraphed way in advance either. The show maintains the obscurity for a while, allowing us to put together the pieces right along with Belascoarán. Luis Gerardo Mendez plays Belascoarán, and he really grew on me in a quick way. His inquisitiveness and his positivity make him endearing, and then he comes across as an everyman who's using just his natural skill at observation and problem solving to work the cases. In addition to Belascoarán, there are a few sidekicks that round out the cast. Now, his sister is an activist and a professor, so she's able to assist him with information and connections. And then he shares an office with a plumber, and I just love their interactions. I mean, it's friendly and jokingly antagonistic because they just rib each other, but they also work really well together. And most of the time, the verbal sparring is really funny. Belascoarán also meets a love interest, and they make a great pair, especially with their witty back and forth. As the show goes along, I was surprised by the level of peril that begins to build for the characters. The stakes continued to rise, and with some of the sequences, it feels like a very real possibility that bad things could happen to some of the players. And while each of the 3-hour-long episodes has its own mystery and arc, there is an overarching story that connects all three so that they don't feel disjointed in any way. And the pacing is really good also. It's patient enough to allow the intrigue to build, but moves quick enough to not get bogged down in unnecessary tangents, and then keeps the narrative progressing in an exciting manner. I was a little surprised at the violence that's captured in the show. And while there is a murder to kick off the series, as this goes along, the violence becomes a bit more prevalent and bloody. And I like that progression as it grows with Belascoarán's involvement in his cases. And there's also a fair amount of action with car chases, shootouts, and of course a lot of sneaking around dark corners just trying to surveil a subject. Each help to really keep the show exciting, but also varies up the pace to keep things fairly unexpected. There are some great title and graphical effects that are utilized throughout the show too. A lot of the time they're subtle in their execution. Now, there's a point where Belascoarán is walking down a street and he's thinking of some photos that are part of his ongoing case. And then these photos, they're plastered on the wall behind him like old signs as he walks along. And they just work to reinforce his narration, but they also appear in a way that complements the aesthetic. And there are other times when on-screen graphics will show some animations, and again, just to reinforce what's being discussed. And it added a lot of visual interest instead of just having us watch a character rehash some information. I think my biggest complaint about this series is that the first season is only 3 episodes long. I mean, I was hooked on the character and I wanted to spend more time in his world working on the cases. And this series ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, so I'm really hopeful that we get more for this story. This was unexpectedly fun with a lead character who has a ton of charisma. And the mysteries are complex enough to not be easily solved, but also not too convoluted or difficult that they can't be understood. And if you enjoy a good detective story, especially one that's led by a charming and affable character, I think you should give this one a go. It's a quick binge, but well worth the time. So overall, Belascoarán is a captivating neo-noir with a refreshing twist of an optimistic and unjaded detective. There's action, humor, romance, and most importantly, intrigue that all combine to bring a dynamic story with a wonderful cast. The backdrop of 1970s Mexico City creates an excellent aesthetic to allow Belascoarán to shine despite the grit of the surroundings. There's sex, nudity, a lot of profanity, and a bunch of violence. I give season 1 of Belascoarán 4.5 out of 5 couches. So do you enjoy detective stories? What's one that you gravitate towards? And probably for me, my favorite is going to be Luther with Idris Elba, but there are so many good ones available. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.